I stood in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the granite countertop. The muffled voices of my husband Joe and his mother Helen drifted from the study, their hushed tones only amplifying my growing unease. I shouldn't be eavesdropping, but something in my gut told me I needed to hear this. "Mom, I know it's a big change, but Claire will understand." Joe's voice carried through the door. "We have plenty of room, and it'll be good for all of us." My breath caught in my throat. What would I understand? Helen's reply was softer, but unmistakable. "I just don't want to be a burden, Joe. Are you sure Claire won't mind?" "Of course not," Joe assured her. "Besides, it's our house, too. Claire doesn't get to make all the decisions." I felt as if I'd been doused with ice water. Our house, the one I'd inherited from my parents, the one I'd lovingly maintained for decades. I pushed away from the counter, my mind reeling. The study door opened, and I scrambled to look busy, grabbing a dish towel and wiping down the already spotless counter. "Claire, honey?" Joe called out. "Can you come here for a second?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself before turning to face them. "What's going on?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Joe's smile was too wide, too forced. "Mom and I were just talking, and we have a great idea." Helen stood slightly behind him, her eyes darting nervously between us. I'd always thought we had a good relationship, but now I wasn't so sure. "Oh," I said, arching an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" Joe reached out to take my hand, but I subtly shifted away. His brow furrowed slightly before he continued. "Well, you know Mom's been having a hard time managing that big house on her own since Dad passed." I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "We were thinking," Joe went on, "that it might be nice if she moved in with us for a while, just until she figures out her next steps." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "Move in?" I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Here?" Helen stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Oh, Claire, I don't want to impose. It's just that Joe thought." I cut in, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "And when exactly were you planning on discussing this with me, Joe?" His smile faltered. Well, I wanted to make sure Mom was on board first. I knew you'd be fine with it." "Did you?" I said, my tone icy. "Because, from where I'm standing, it sounds like you two have been planning this for a while without bothering to include me." Joe's face darkened. "Now, Claire, don't be like that. Mom needs our help." I turned to Helen, forcing myself to soften my expression. "Helen, I'm sorry, but this is a lot to take in. How long have you two been discussing this?" Helen glanced at Joe, her discomfort evident. "Well, we've been talking about it for a few weeks now. I told Joe we should wait, but—" "Weeks?" I interrupted, my composure cracking. "You've been planning this for weeks, and I'm just hearing about it now?" Joe stepped towards me, his voice low and urgent. "Claire, you're overreacting. It's not a big deal. Mom needs us, and we have the space." I took a step back, my hands clenched at my sides. "Not a big deal. This is my home, Joe. Our home. And you're making decisions about who lives here without even consulting me?" The tension in the room was palpable. Helen looked like she wanted to disappear, while Joe's jaw was set in that stubborn way I knew all too well. "I think," I said, fighting to keep my voice level, "that we all need some time to cool off and think about this. Helen, I'm sorry, but I need to speak with my husband alone." As Helen hurried out of the room, I turned to face Joe, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about Helen moving in. This was about trust, respect, and the realization that maybe I didn't know my husband as well as I thought I did. And I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of our troubles. The sound of Helen's laughter drifted up the stairs, mingling with the aroma of her famous pot roast. I gripped my book tighter, trying to focus on the words, but they blurred before my eyes. It had been 3 weeks since Helen moved in, and already our home felt like it belonged to someone else. I heard Joe's heavy footsteps on the stairs. "Claire, dinner's ready." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for another meal of forced smiles and stilted conversation. "Coming," I called, setting my book aside. As I entered the dining room, Helen beamed at me from her seat next to Joe. "My seat. Oh, Claire, I hope you don't mind, but I thought I'd try out my pot roast recipe. Joe always loved it when he was growing up." I plastered on a smile. "That's thoughtful of you, Helen. I'm sure it's delicious." Joe barely looked up from his plate. Mom's pot roast is the best. You'll love it, Claire. I sat down, my appetite vanishing. I'm sure I will. As we ate, Helen dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of Joe's childhood. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling more like an outsider with each passing moment. Oh, Joe, Helen said, patting his arm, remember how you used to help me in the kitchen? Maybe you could start doing that again. Give Claire a break from all the cooking. I set my fork down with a clatter. I enjoy cooking, Helen. It's not a chore for me. Helen's eyes widened. Oh, I didn't mean to imply, I just thought with your busy schedule. My schedule is fine, I said, my voice tight. I manage just fine. Joe frowned at me. Mom's just trying to help, Claire. No need to get defensive. I bit back a retort, choosing instead to take a long sip of water. The tension in the room was palpable. After dinner, I escaped to the kitchen, busying myself with dishes. Joe followed me in, his expression troubled. What's going on with you lately? He asked, leaning against the counter. You've been so prickly. I scrubbed a plate with more force than necessary. Prickly? Is that what you call it when I express an opinion in my own home? Joe sighed. Come on, Claire. Mom's just trying to fit in. Can't you make more of an effort? I whirled to face him. More of an effort? Joe, I've bent over backward trying to accommodate your mother, but it feels like she's taking over our home, and you're letting her. That's ridiculous, Joe scoffed. She's just being helpful. Helpful? I echoed. Is that what you call rearranging my kitchen without asking, or changing our routines to suit her preferences? Joe's face hardened. She's my mother, Claire, and she needs us right now. I thought you'd understand that. I felt a surge of frustration. Of course I understand that, but this is our home, Joe, our life, and lately it feels like I'm the outsider. Before Joe could respond, Helen appeared in the doorway. Is everything all right? I heard raised voices. Joe immediately softened his tone. Everything's fine, Mom. Claire and I were just discussing some things. Helen's gaze darted between us. Oh, I hope I'm not causing any trouble. Maybe I should start looking for my own place. No, Joe said quickly. You're not going anywhere, Mom. Claire's just having a hard time adjusting, that's all. I stared at him, stunned by his dismissal of my feelings. I'm going for a walk, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I heard Helen's voice behind me. Oh, Joe, I feel terrible. Maybe I should talk to her. Leave her be, Mom, Joe replied. She'll come around. She always does. I stepped out into the cool evening air, fighting back tears. As I walked down our quiet street, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing not just my home, but my husband as well, and I had no idea how to fix it. I was in the middle of folding laundry when the doorbell rang. Grateful for any distraction from the monotony of household chores, I hurried to answer it. The moment I opened the door, my heart sank. There stood Nick, Joe's younger brother, looking disheveled and carrying a battered duffel bag. Hey, sis, he said with a lopsided grin. Surprise! Before I could respond, Joe appeared behind me. Nick, what are you doing here? Nick's grin faltered. What? No hello. For your little brother? I quit my job. Figured I'd come home for a while. Joe ushered him inside, and I felt my carefully maintained equilibrium shatter. As if having Helen here wasn't enough. Now this. You can't just show up unannounced, I said, trying to keep my voice level. We don't have room. Oh, don't be silly, Helen's voice chimed in as she bustled into the foyer. There's plenty of room. Nick can stay in the guest room. I whirled to face her. Helen, that's your room now, and we can't just... It's fine, Helen interrupted. I'll move to the den. It'll be cozy. Joe nodded, clapping Nick on the shoulder. See? Problem solved. I stood there, mouth agape, as they all moved past me into the living room. It was like I'd become invisible in my own home. Later that evening, I cornered Joe in our bedroom. We need to talk about this, I hissed. Nick can't stay here. We can't afford another mouth to feed, and you know how he is. Joe sighed, running a hand through his hair. Claire, he's family. We can't turn him away. Besides, it's only temporary. That's what you said about your mother, I retorted. And now look where we are. What's that supposed to mean? Joe's voice took on a dangerous edge. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It means that our home is becoming a boarding house, and I don't have any say in it. It's my home, too, Joe snapped. And they're my family. Why are you being so selfish? His words hit me like a slap. Selfish? Is that what you think this is? Before Joe could respond, we heard a crash from downstairs, followed by Nick's muffled cursing. We rushed down to find Nick standing amidst the shattered remains of my grandmother's antique vase. The acrid smell of alcohol hung in the air. "Oops," Nick said with a sheepish grin. "My bad." I felt something snap inside me. "That's it," I said, my voice shaking. "Nick, you need to leave. Now." Joe stepped between us. "Claire, calm down. It was an accident." "An accident?" I echoed incredulously. "He's drunk, Joe, in our home." Nick's face darkened. "Hey, I didn't ask to be here, you know. If you two hadn't sold the family home—" "We didn't have a choice," Joe shouted. "Mom couldn't manage it anymore, and you weren't exactly offering to help." I watched in stunned silence as the brothers faced off, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. "Boys, please," Helen pleaded, appearing from the den. "Let's not fight." I turned to her, my patience finally at its end. "This is your fault," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You've turned this house upside down since you arrived, and now this." Helen's eyes widened in shock. "Claire, I never meant—" "Save it," I cut her off. I turned to Joe, who was staring at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I want them both out. Now." Joe's jaw clenched. "You don't get to make that decision on your own." "Don't I?" I challenged. "This is my house, Joe. The one I inherited from my parents, and I'm telling you I want them out." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Joe looked from me to his mother and brother, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "If they go," he said slowly, "I go with them." His words hung in the air between us, a line drawn in the sand. As I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of my grandmother's vase and the family I thought I knew, I realized that everything had changed and there was no going back. The days following Nick's arrival blurred together in a haze of tension and barely contained anger. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around Nick's mood swings and Joe's growing resentment. Helen, for her part, seemed determined to play peacemaker, which only grated on my nerves further. One morning I came downstairs to find Nick sprawled on the couch, empty beer cans littering the coffee table. The clock read 10:30 a.m. "Nick," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "don't you think it's time to start looking for a job?" He cracked open one eye, regarding me with disdain. "What are you, my mother?" I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. "No, but I am the one whose home you're living in. For free, I might add." Nick sat up, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, that's rich. You think this is your home? This was our family's house long before you came along, sweetheart." "Actually," I said, my patience wearing thin, "this house belonged to my parents. Joe and I moved in after they passed." Nick's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Well, aren't you Little Miss Perfect? Bet you think you're better than us, don't you?" Before I could respond, Joe walked in. "What's going on here?" "Your wife," Nick spat, "is trying to kick me out." Joe turned to me, his expression hardening. "Claire, we talked about this. Nick stays." I felt a surge of frustration. "Joe, he's drinking all day, making a mess, and refusing to look for work. How long are we supposed to put up with this?" "He's family," Joe said, as if that explained everything. "And what am I?" I shot back. "Because lately it feels like I'm just the maid and ATM for your family." Joe's face flushed with anger. "That's not fair, Claire. You know how important family is to me." "I thought I was your family, too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between us. Nick looked from Joe to me, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Trouble in paradise?" he taunted. I whirled on him. "You, out, now." Joe stepped between us. "Claire, stop it. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I echoed, incredulous. "Your brother is a drunk who's taking advantage of us, and you're letting him." "Don't talk about my brother like that," Joe growled. I threw my hands up in exasperation. "Fine. If you won't do something about this, I will." I stormed out of the room, my mind racing. I needed to get out of the house to clear my head. As I grabbed my keys, Helen appeared in the hallway. "Claire, dear," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "why don't we sit down and talk about this? I'm sure we can work something out." I turned to her, my patience finally snapping. "No, Helen. We can't work something out. This is my home, and I'm tired of being treated like an outsider in it." Helen's face fell. "Oh, Claire, we're just trying to be a family. Why can't you understand that?" "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Nick are tearing my marriage apart." Helen's eyes widened in shock. Now that's not fair. Joe loves you. Does he? I interrupted, because lately it feels like he loves you and Nick more than he ever loved me. I pushed past her, ignoring her protests as I headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, Joe's voice called out behind me. Claire, where are you going? I turned to face him, seeing the confusion and anger in his eyes. In that moment, I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay and continue to be pushed aside, or I could stand up for myself, even if it meant risking everything. I'm leaving, Joe, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. And when I come back, I expect Nick to be gone. If he's not... I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. If he's not, then maybe I shouldn't come back at all. With that, I walked out the door, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. As I got into my car, I caught a glimpse of Joe's face in the window. The look of shock and betrayal I saw there made my heart ache, but I knew I had to stand my ground. It was time to fight for my home, my marriage, and myself. I returned home late that evening, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and determination. The house was quiet as I entered, but the acrid smell of smoke hit me immediately. My heart raced as I rushed through the rooms, calling out for Joe. I found him in the kitchen, scrubbing furiously at a blackened pot. The window was wide open, and a fan was whirring at full speed. What happened? I demanded, my voice tight with fear and anger. Joe jumped, turning to face me with guilty eyes. Claire, you're back. It's nothing. Just a little cooking accident. But I could see the scorch marks on the wall behind the stove, the melted plastic of the nearby utensils. This was no small accident. Where's Nick? Where's Nick? I asked, my suspicion growing. Joe's hesitation told me everything. He went out for a bit, to clear his head. Joe, I said, my voice dangerously low, tell me the truth. What happened? He sighed, shoulders slumping. Nick was trying to cook something. He'd been drinking and, well, he fell asleep. The pot caught fire. But it's okay. We put it out before it spread. I felt the blood drain from my face. You put it out? Who's we? Mom and I, Joe admitted. We were upstairs when we smelled the smoke. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd known. They'd all known, and they'd tried to hide it from me. When did this happen? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Joe couldn't meet my eyes. This afternoon, right after you left. I stumbled back, gripping the counter for support. You've been cleaning up all day, trying to hide this from me? We didn't want to worry you, Helen's voice came from behind me. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. Joe thought it best if we handled it ourselves. Handled it? I repeated, incredulous. Nick could have burned our house down. He could have killed you both. But he didn't, Joe interjected. It was an accident, Claire. These things happen. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. These things happen. Joe, your brother is out of control. He's dangerous, and you're enabling him. That's not fair, Helen cut in. Nick is going through a difficult time. He needs our support, not judgment. I whirled on her. And what about me, Helen? What about what I need? This is my home, and I don't feel safe here anymore. The front door slammed, and Nick's voice called out, slurred and jovial. Hey, family, who's ready for round 2? Something inside me snapped. I stormed past Helen and Joe, marching into the living room where Nick was sprawled on the couch, a fresh beer in hand. You, I said, my voice shaking with rage, you need to leave. Now. Nick looked up at me, his eyes unfocused. Aw, come on, sis, don't be like that. I'm not your sister, I spat, and this isn't your home. You almost burned it down today, and I want you out. Joe appeared beside me, his face pale. Claire, please, let's talk about this. No, I said, my resolve hardening. I'm done talking. Either Nick leaves, or I do. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Nick staggered to his feet, his face twisting into a sneer. You can't kick me out, he slurred. This is my family's house. You're just the interloper. I felt something break inside me. Years of frustration, of feeling like an outsider in my own home, came rushing to the surface. This is my house, I said, my voice low and dangerous. The house my parents left to me. And I want you out. All of you. Joe's face crumpled. Claire, you don't mean that. We're family. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I'd married, the one who'd promised to stand by me, was gone. No, Joe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We're not family. Not anymore. I turned and walked out of the room. my decision made. As I climbed the stairs to pack a bag, I heard the muffled voices of Joe and Helen trying to calm Nick down. But I was beyond caring. It was time to take back control of my life, even if it meant leaving behind everything I thought I knew. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at my own front door in disbelief. The lock had been changed. I jiggled the handle again, hoping against hope that it was just stuck, but the cold metal remained unyielding under my grip. "Joe," I called out, my voice cracking. "Joe, open the door." Silence greeted me. I pounded on the door, my frustration mounting. "Helen? Nick? Someone open this door right now." A curtain twitched in the living room window, and I caught a glimpse of Helen's face before she quickly disappeared from view. My blood boiled. "I know you're in there," I shouted. "This is my house. You can't lock me out." Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing Joe. His face was a mask of forced calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the guilt in his eyes. "Claire," he said, his voice low and controlled, "I think you need some time to cool off." I gaped at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Cool off? You locked me out of my own home," Joe sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's for the best, Claire. You're not thinking clearly. You threatened to kick us all out, remember? Because Nick almost burned the house down," I retorted, my voice rising. "And you all tried to hide it from me." "It was an accident," Joe insisted. "And you're overreacting. We're family, Claire. We need to stick together." I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. "Family? Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've chosen your mother and brother over your wife." Joe's face hardened. "That's not fair. I'm trying to keep everyone together." "At what cost, Joe?" I asked, my voice breaking. "At the cost of our marriage? Of my sanity?" Before Joe could respond, Nick appeared behind him, beer in hand. "What's the problem?" he slurred. "Can't the little woman take a joke?" I saw red. "You," I snarled, lunging forward. Joe caught me, holding me back as I struggled against him. "You're the problem, Nick. You're destroying everything." "Claire, stop it," Joe shouted, Joe the Bat pushing me back onto the porch. "This is exactly why you need to leave. You're out of control." I stumbled backward, shocked by the force of his push. As I regained my balance, I saw Helen appear in the doorway, her face a picture of false concern. "Oh, Claire," she cooed, "why don't you go stay with a friend for a few days? Give everyone a chance to calm down." The patronizing tone in her voice was the final straw. I straightened up, my voice deadly calm as I addressed Joe. "If you don't let me in right now, I'm calling the police." Joe's eyes widened in alarm. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I challenged. For a moment, we stood there in a tense standoff. Then, to my horror, Joe slowly shook his head. "I'm sorry, Claire, but this is for your own good. For all of our good." And with that, he closed the door in my face. I heard the lock click into place, final and damning. I stood there, stunned, as the reality of the situation crashed over me. I was locked out of my own home, betrayed by the man I had loved and trusted for decades. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice breaking. "I need help." As I walked away from the house that was no longer my home, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Joe and his family had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I may have lost my home for now, but I was far from defeated. It was time to fight back, and I knew exactly where to start. I sat across from my lawyer, Sarah, my hands clutching a manila folder filled with documents. The past week had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations, but now I felt a steely resolve settling over me. "Are you sure about this, Claire?" Sarah asked, her eyes searching mine. "Once we file these papers, there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm sure. It's time to take back control of my life." Sarah nodded, reaching for the divorce papers. As she began to file them, my mind raced back to the conversation I'd had with my mother just days ago. "Claire," she'd said, her voice filled with a strength I'd forgotten she possessed, "you're not the first woman to face this kind of betrayal, and you won't be the last. But you have something many others don't. That house is yours. Fight for it." Her words had ignited a fire in me, reminding me of the strong, independent woman I used to be, the woman I could be again. A knock on the office door jolted me back to the present. Sarah's assistant poked her head in. "Mrs. Thompson? There's a Joe Thompson here to see you. He says it's urgent." My heart raced as Joe burst into the room, his face a mix of anger and desperation. "Claire, what are you doing? Divorce papers. This is insane." I stood facing him squarely. "No, Joe, what's insane is locking your wife out of her own home. What's insane is choosing your alcoholic brother over your marriage." Joe's face crumpled. "I never chose Nick over you. I was trying to help everyone. By betraying me?" I shot back. "By hiding things from me? That's not how a marriage works, Joe." "Please," he begged, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "We can fix this. Just come home." I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of sadness and strength. "It's not my home anymore, Joe. You made that clear when you changed the locks." Sarah cleared her throat, reminding us of her presence. "Mr. Thompson, I must advise you to leave. Any further communication should go through your lawyer." Joe's eyes widened as the reality of the situation sank in. "Lawyer? Claire, you can't be serious. That house, it's our home." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's my home, the one my parents left to me, and I want it back." Joe stumbled backward as if I'd struck him. You're kicking us out?" "I'm reclaiming what's mine," I corrected him. "You, Helen, and Nick need to find somewhere else to live." The color drained from Joe's face. "But where will we go? Mom can't afford her own place, and Nick—" "That's not my problem anymore," I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "You made your choice, Joe. Now you have to live with it." As Sarah ushered a shell-shocked Joe out of the office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, but my relief was short-lived. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. "Claire, there's a moving truck at your house. Helen and Nick are loading things into it. You need to get here now." My heart raced as I showed the message to Sarah. "What do I do?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. "We fight. I'll call the police. You get to that house and stop them from taking anything that isn't theirs." As I rushed out of the office, my mind whirled with possibilities. What if I was too late? What if they'd already taken everything? What if Joe had sold or destroyed my belongings out of spite? I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I sped towards my house, towards the confrontation that would determine the course of my future. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, hung in the balance. As I turned onto my street and saw the moving truck in my driveway, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. This was war, and I was ready to fight. I stood in the doorway of my newly reclaimed home, surveying the empty rooms with a mixture of relief and melancholy. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal battles, emotional confrontations, and painful goodbyes. But here I was, finally alone in the house that had been the center of so much turmoil. The day I'd arrived to find Helen and Nick loading the moving truck had been the turning point. With Sarah's legal backing and the police's intervention, we'd managed to stop them from taking anything that wasn't rightfully theirs. Joe had shown up, his face a mask of disbelief and anger, but it was too late. The truth about the house's ownership had come to light, and they had no choice but to leave. Now, as I walked through the quiet rooms, memories flooded back, both good and bad. I paused in the kitchen, remembering the countless meals I'd prepared for Joe, the laughter we'd shared, the dreams we'd built. But those memories were tainted now by the betrayal and lies that had torn us apart. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find my neighbor, Martha, holding a casserole dish. "Thought you might need some company and a hot meal," she said with a warm smile. As we sat at my kitchen table, Martha filled me in on the neighborhood gossip. Apparently, Helen and Nick had moved in with a distant cousin, while Joe had rented a small apartment across town. "Have you heard from any of them?" Martha asked gently. I shook my head. "No, and I don't expect to. It's better this way." Martha reached across the table, patting my hand. "You know, Claire, I've always admired your strength. Not many women our age would have the courage to start over like this." Her words struck a chord in me. Starting over. That's exactly what I was doing, wasn't it? The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I spent the day decluttering, donating items that held too many painful memories. As I worked, I felt lighter, as if I was shedding the weight of my past with each box I filled. Weeks passed, and slowly I began to rediscover myself. I joined a book club, took up painting classes, and even started volunteering at the local animal shelter. The house that had once felt like a prison now became my sanctuary, a place where I could heal and grow. One sunny afternoon, as I was leaving the courthouse after finalizing some paperwork, I quite literally bumped into someone. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice said. I looked up to see a distinguished-looking man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I assured him, feeling a flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. He introduced himself as David, a recently retired judge. We got to talking, and before I knew it, we were sharing coffee at a nearby cafe. As David regaled me with stories from his years on the bench, I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. When he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime, I surprised myself by saying yes. That evening, as I stood in front of my mirror getting ready for my date, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the defeated, worn-down version of myself that had existed just months ago. In her place stood a woman with a sparkle in her eye and hope in her heart. I thought back to the day Joe had locked me out of our home, how lost and betrayed I had felt. If someone had told me then that I'd be where I am now, divorced, yes, but stronger, happier, and on the cusp of a new adventure, I wouldn't have believed them. As I grabbed my purse and headed out the door, I paused for a moment, looking back at the house that had seen so much drama and pain. But now, it was filled with possibility and promise. I had reclaimed not just my home, but myself. With a smile, I locked the door behind me and stepped out into the warm evening air. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it might lead. My story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning.